Well, my friends, at this point in our service, we would normally be collecting up the tithes and offerings of God's people as an expression of generosity back to God for His abundance and care for us. And while I know many of you are yearning, like I am, to be back in that temple space, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be a new normal, offerings being one of them. We're not sure exactly what that looks like. I can assure you the elders and I are working on that right now to figure out what that will look like, and encourage you to be patient as we wait for that opportunity to be back together face to face, and to be able to do that as safely and healthily as possible. I think there's a lot of uncertainty in the world. It's a good opportunity to acknowledge that fact. Both financially and economically in our world, there's a lot of uncertainty, and it's affected all of us in different ways. And yet God has been abundantly blessing us in the midst of all of it. I can see the evidence of that all the time. And at the same time, while there's many theories as to how this virus has come about, how this pandemic has come about, I don't want to speculate too much on that, or why even God has allowed this to happen. I am certain and confident of this fact, that God is capable of taking the worst things that can happen in this world and turning them into vehicles for His goodness to be abundantly poured out on others. I mean, He's kind of in the business of doing that, right? Look at the cross. The worst thing that can happen in the world, God turns that into a vehicle for resurrection power, not just for Jesus, but for you and me. And this pandemic has pushed us apart in some ways, but I think it's also encouraged us to lean in. And while we heard a little bit of Philip's story in the gospel lesson today, there's another part of his story that I want to point you to in John 12. There are some people who come up to Philip and say, "Sir, we want to see Jesus." And I think that's a good reminder to us that as God abundantly blesses us, He puts us in places and amongst people who are going to be saying that exact same thing, if we have the ears to hear it. Maybe not exactly, but there are people out there in your midst right now, in your spheres of influence, and the people that you come into contact with, who are saying, maybe not with their words, but with their actions, "We want to see Jesus." May God continue to abundantly bless us with the good news to respond in faithfulness to those requests and to point people to Jesus. We gather up our gifts and offerings for God. God is so good. God is so good. God is so good. God is so good. He's so good to me. He cares for me. He cares for me. He cares for me. He cares for me. He's so good to me. He died for me. He died for me. He died for me. He died for me. He's so good to me. He loves me so. He loves me so. He loves me so. He loves me so. He's so good to me.